Perfect. It's recording. So thank you so much, Roshan, for being on the call. I really appreciate your time, and I really respect the fact that you have kept your background as the Indian flag, which is really amazing. So double multiple respects for you. And so just to give people a brief background about yourself from my side, I'll just give your a brief introduction. I'll of course ask you to give an introduction as well. But yeah, so I met Roshan during my master's at Duke University. Since then, we became really good friends during the time period while we were part of the same. I would say one of the groups that was in the courses that we took. I guess it was CPP, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, since then we became really good friends. He did his undergrad from BITS, which is an amazing college back in India. So, and I learn a lot from Roshan. I mean, funny enough, Roshan is 3 years younger to me, but it's always the other way around. He always teaches me a lot of things, so I really appreciate that, and I learn from him a lot. I hope this conversation doesn't go to the political side of it, because if we start speaking, I'm sure it's going to end up there only. So we'll try our level best that this conversation doesn't go to the political side of it, be it India, be it US. So that's that. And thanks again, Roshan, for joining the call. So if you can give you a brief introduction about yourself to whosoever is on the call.
Absolutely. Well, firstly, Safaya, thank you so very much for your warm words and for also this wonderful opportunity to make me part of this Sundays with Safaya show that you have taken up. Uh, Tomorrow, that is August 19th, 2020, marks the second anniversary of my arrival here in the United States as a master's student. So it's incredible to think of reflecting on the journey I've had over the last 2 years, both at a personal and professional standpoint. But to get to your main question, that is, providing a brief introduction about myself. I was born in California, but my family decided to move back to our home country, India. To be more specific, Hyderabad, which is a city in the southern part of India, when I was around 7 or 8 years old. Growing up, I was incredibly fascinated by the design and development process of technology, just like many other young individuals in our country. So I pursued my undergraduate studies from BITS Pilani Hyderabad campus, and I started off as a computer science engineering major, but increasingly developed a stronger affinity and interest towards leadership, strategy, and financial aspects of organizations during my second and third year. And that's why I picked up a minor in finance during those years. Really enjoyed doing a lot of those courses, along with some of the other management or humanities related courses I've taken up. During my final year as an undergraduate student, I did an investment banking internship at JP Morgan Chase, where I was part of the debt capital markets team. Unlike now, back then the interest rates were zero. So the bond market was crazy with huge volumes of bond issuances. Uh, Investment banking was fun in such a big organization, but it seemed like the learning curve would flatten a little too soon there. For those reasons, right after my undergrad in 2022, I came back to the United States for my master's in engineering management at our beloved Duke University. Uh, Started looking for my internship primarily in the consulting arena, which we would want to double click a little more. But started as a corporate strategy intern for Mutual of Omaha, which is a Fortune 350 company primarily serving the financial services and the insurance sector. Worked on numerous new revenue opportunities, corporate venture capital efforts, and more related projects there. And starting from fall 2023, recruited for consulting, landed a job offer from Advancy, which is a France-based consulting firm. It's been about 6 months since I started my first job as a junior consultant at Advancy. Recently concluded my sixth project. So it's been a tremendous learning curve there. Super excited about the other things that would be coming very shortly.
Perfect. No, I really appreciate that, Roshan. That's a nice and lovely brief introduction. Uh, I know, I think I might not have ever asked you about this while we were at Duke, and I know this is more about the internship search and the full-time search and how you got there. But before that, I just wanted to ask one question about why, because you mentioned you did your minors in finance, and then you I think because I know personally, not that you mentioned that, but I know that you have a love for investment banking, and IB is something that you love, and consulting. So I just wanted to mention that, as you already know, that Duke MEM's program is majority of the students end up in product management, project management, and supply chain management, these kind of domains. I know still some of the people do get into consulting, but that's what the norm has been, technically. So I just wanted to, before I get into the other side of it, I just wanted to understand, like, why Duke MEM specifically?
Absolutely. Well, yes, this might sound super counterintuitive because a lot of individuals take up the MEM program because they want to get into product management or a couple of other career tracks which are adjacent to product management. In my case, I was very particular about getting into a program where I could enjoy the coursework and try to upskill myself in new verticals as well. Since I had a minor in finance, had good internship experience in the finance world as well, I was not particularly looking to do a master's program in finance. It might be a little too heavy on the quant side, or maybe the traditional financial concepts that one can think of. I was also not looking to do a master's in data science or business analytics, which could be quite heavy from a programming or a coding standpoint. So it was actually the curriculum of MEM programs across multiple universities that really drew me towards it. When I was doing my fair share of research about the different career outcomes that can be expected from MEM, it was mostly product management. But for some reason, I had a strong feeling that the coursework is super aligned to consulting as well. Now, even if you were to examine some of the own courses that you have taken, be it competitive strategies or design thinking and innovation, some of our core courses like marketing and more, they are super relevant to consulting. I have seen some use of these course concepts when I was even preparing for consulting case interviews as well. So this might sound counterintuitive to many people, but Duke is also, or maybe for that matter, MEM is a great program for those who want to get into consulting as well. It's just that the percentage of aspirants who want to get into consulting is pretty low in MEM programs for a variety of reasons. And there are individuals who made it to consulting. So it was, few people from different MEM programs who made into consulting that installed some level of confidence that, yes, this is a possibility. I am not being blinded by some random things out there.
No, perfect. I really appreciate that, Roshan. No, I agree to that. I think the only reason why I asked this question was because sometimes I talk to people and their question is, I want to get into consulting. So would Duke MEM would be a great choice or not? So I think I try to answer them as much as I can, but I think you being in that background that you've entered, so you can give you a better perspective or purview of, because you're in the domain right now. So yeah, that's really, thanks for that answer. Now, Roshan, I wanna kind of switch gears and ask my second question, I would say rather, which is more about your internship search. So if you can help us go through that journey, and when I say journey, if you can mention quickly about I'm not sure if you would remember how many number of applications, because it's very difficult to, of course, remember, but some ballpark number if you remember how many number of applications that you applied to, and some interviews, and then the internship that you were a part of. So how many rounds of interview were there? And then I know these are too many questions inside of one question, but how was that process, and kind of what was the expectations of the interviewer and things like that?
Of course. So as I previously mentioned, I landed in the United States in the midweek of August. I attributed a lot of seriousness to my internship search, just like a lot of our fellow students attributed to the much deserving aspect of your college experience. So I started looking for or applying for internships in the first week of September itself. Maybe during the orientation week, when I found some time, I used to spend a good amount of time crafting my cover letter, crafting my resume, keeping a track of different application deadlines. I started off by applying for different consulting firms, applied for a couple of growth equity firms as well. I was being a little too ambitious back then. And also a tinge of optimism was alive in me too. But increasingly, I got to know that consulting firms, especially for their summer internship programs, have a much stronger preference for undergraduate students more than non-MBA master students. So for the MBAs, you have a separate summer internship track. And for undergrads too, you have a separate summer internship track, but you don't have a lot of consulting firms with specific programs for non-MBA master students. So I did apply for a few consulting firms. I, in fact, interviewed with a good number of consulting firms such as Cicero Group, Simon Kucher and Partners, which is a European-based consulting firm again. And it was because of this realization early on, sometime in the midweek of October or maybe in the first week of November itself, I started to become more agile. I thought the job market is much more challenging than I expected it would be. So I started diversifying to other kind of job applications too. I particularly applied for a lot of corporate strategy positions, which in many ways is similar to consulting. You're just an in-house consultant who's a bit more focused on the implementation aspects of some of the strategic initiatives that you're launching to. And even then, I came to know that a lot of consulting firms are fine with non-MBA master students for full-time job programs. So I was like, okay, if I cannot get a consulting summer internship, let me try to get something that is incredibly close to it, which is corporate strategy, corporate development. I've also applied to a fairly good number of business analyst positions too, and thought I could leverage those internship experiences to get my foot in the consulting full-time job role.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Roshan, for that. So now, if you can help me with the interview process for your internship and like how many rounds were there, and a quick on yeah, what kind of questions they were asking and what was their expectation. I'm not sure how much you would be already knowing, their expectation. I understand that, but something as per your understanding as well. So that
Absolutely. Well, to a large extent, this might vary from firm to firm, but fundamentally, they're kind of testing the same set of skills, whether you have enough quantitative skills or business intuition that is required for a specific role. You can also see a huge amount of overlap in terms of how corporate strategy hiring teams and consulting hiring teams approach the interview process. So for consulting, you have a very traditional standardized process, which is often described as a consulting case interview. So what is a consulting case interview? A consulting case interview is essentially a simulation of a project that might happen for a couple of weeks or even a couple of months. And you and the interviewer in different form factors discuss how we are going to solve the problem in a very structured manner. So to like quickly walk you through what the rubric is like, in most of the cases, and there can be exceptions to how this is handled by different firms, the interviewer gives you a case prompt. You're expected to read it back in a much more concise way just to make sure you got all the details right. And then you are expected to ask a set of clarifying questions, take a minute or two to build a framework, explain that framework in maybe 2 to 2.5 minutes. And then you dive deep into a set of qualitative and quantitative questions. And finally, you give a recommendation. Now, there are a set of firms which do it slightly different. A few firms don't expect a final recommendation as well. But this is how it fundamentally looks like. Uh, so corporate strategy roles too have a very similar interview process, except it's a bit more vague, where it would be much more conversational, where you're probably discussing a little more about current trends and more. Uh, and in terms of the interview rounds, this is one thing that I would want to clarify to a lot of people who must be watching your show. There is this misconception that a lot of consulting firms do 5, 6 rounds of interviews. Maybe in a way that is correct, but that's not how I would put it. Most of the consulting firms, they have 2 or maybe 3 rounds of interviews. Maybe they start with an assessment round, which I'm not counting in this case, but it's mostly 2 to 3 rounds, which might consist of 5 or 6 interviews. So maybe in your first round itself, you're doing 2 interviews. In your second round, you're doing 3 interviews. And together you have 5 interviews. But people normally count this as 5, 6 rounds, which seems way more challenging than what it appears to be. So in most of the cases, I had to encounter 2 to 3 rounds of interviews. In certain cases, each round had just one interview. In a couple of cases, the first round had 2 interviews, the second round had 3 interviews, something on those lines. And I ended up getting my first internship offer in the midweek of Jan, right after our spring semester started, and got another internship offer maybe in the midweek or last week of April as our second semester was coming to an end.
perfect. I know. Thank you so much, Roshan, on that piece of it. And Now, before I get to my second question, which is more about the full-time search, I just want to understand, like before I get into the details of full-time search, I want to understand, did your internship experience help you kind of in your full-time search? And if not search, but did it help it in your interviews? And why am I asking this particular specific question is more about, sometimes people look for a 1 year program because let's say in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, they don't offer like a 2 year MBA. They offer like a 1 year MBA. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm assuming, I think it's difficult to get an internship first and then a full-time job, because if the coursework is just 1 year. So I really want to understand how worthy did you feel that internship helped you, or is it possible if that can be done in a year or so? Because I think these days is a change that I've heard, not that I've seen, I heard that in Duke MEM program, they are offering right now like a 1 year and a 2 year program. So maybe because of the co-op option that's now available, which wasn't in our case. So yeah, if you can throw some light on that.
Right. I'm really glad that you asked this question. Uh, just to quickly answer some of my thoughts about, or present some of my thoughts around the 1 year programs. It's not a bad idea. It really depends on how you're executing and how you're planning your 1 year program. Now, the challenge, in my opinion, is, let's say somebody is taking up a typical master's in management like program, which lasts for just 1 year. You expect the program to start sometime in the midweek of July. That's not when most of the programs start, but even if we were to get a little conservative, let's assume it's starting in the midweek of July. The uh, Bain Company's associate consultants' first round application deadline is on July 7th. So by the time you start your 1 year master's program, you have a couple of consulting firms which are already closing their application deadlines. Now, even if you apply before you start your program, you have almost little exposure to uh, to what the job market is like in the United States, because you haven't had any interaction with career services or the other infrastructure that exists in your university. So this is one drawback that I've seen with 1 year master's program. It's not a bad idea, but if you're taking up a 1 year master's program, make sure you're doing enough diligence, coming here with a very robust plan, because there's just one complete full year recruiting cycle that you're a part of. When we're talking about 3 semester programs or 15-month programs like the one that we've been part of, you, during your internship search, can gain enough knowledge and exposure as to how the job market functions, uh, how the different companies that exist, and you can use all of these learnings to potentially apply them during your full-time job search. And that's the reason why, at a personal level, though the macro environment and the job market got a little challenging by the time we entered the full-time job search, I felt my full-time job search to be a bit more easier than my internship search, to be a little honest with you. So to answer your other question about whether my summer internship explicitly helped me with my job search, I would say 100%. In my opinion, when it comes to your resume, one of the most important factors is the transferable skill sets that you have for the job that you're applying to, especially for consulting and the kind of strategy consulting positions that I have put a large amount of focus on. Having experiences around building market sizing models or growth forecasting models, conducting competitive analysis, performing expert interviews, or authoring surveys. These are the kind of transferable skill sets or experiences that you would want to flex in your resume. And a US-based experience, internship experience, and a recent experience cannot add more strength. It's phenomenal as far as your job search is concerned. Now, again, just because one is not getting an internship does not mean it's the end of the world. I have personally witnessed many individuals who, in spite of not landing great internship programs or not getting an internship at all, have done phenomenally well in their job search. But our objective at the end of the day is to maximize our chances in the best way possible to gain as much knowledge and learning curve as possible. And an internship is a great way to do it. And most importantly, you're making some money, which you can throw for some of your fall semester trips.
Perfect. No, no, I really appreciate that, Roshan, and I appreciate the honesty as well, frankly. So that's really nice. And now I think now I can get to my main question, and one of the major reasons that I invited you was, the full-time search. So if you can help us again explain how the full-time search has been, and the job that you are in right now, as you mentioned, it's already been 6 months. My next question is going to be more about if you can help me through that process, how the interview rounds were, and like if in case you can help us with some kind of questions and get into the details. And then probably I shouldn't ask this question right now, but later on I might ask was more regards to what would you teach yourself, or ask yourself to do, or if you're like 21 again, and not that I'm revealing your age, but if it's like somebody new is trying to get into consulting, somebody's trying to get into Duke MEM program, and maybe all these sorts of domains. So what learning you might throw out for them. But that's on the later on. We don't have to tell right now there. But first, we'll focus on the full-time job search and the full-time interview.
100%. Uh, for all those who want to get into consulting, the one thing that I would want you all to be mindful about is the application deadlines for some of the most prestigious consulting firms is super early. Like when I tell people that consulting firms' applications close in the month of June or July itself, they're like super surprised. Like they believe that the semester starts in August. Why on earth is the application being closed in the month of June or July itself? It's primarily because a lot of consulting firms, they tend to compete with investment banks when it comes to recruiting talent. These firms are very asset light, in my opinion. The only asset that they have is maybe wall paintings in their office and the people, human resources. So there's a massive talent war that's going on in the consulting industry. And that's the reason why the application deadlines are being pulled forward each and every year. So the first line of advice for any individual out there is prepare a very long list of consulting firms, not just traditional management and strategy consulting firms, but also economics and litigation consulting firms, which a lot of people might not have heard of. I can think of many individuals who rejected offers from some prestigious firms like Bain to get into economics and litigation based consulting firms like that of Analysis Group or Charles River Associates and firms on those lines. Now, you should be having a very strong resume and cover letter for your consulting application. The transferable skill sets I've mentioned as far as your resume is concerned. Try to make your cover letter as tailored as possible. Try to do a good number of networking calls, because name dropping individuals with whom you have had conversations in your cover letter can give you a marginal edge over other candidates. You don't come out as a regular applicant, just somebody who's doing an ordinary cold application. You come out as somebody who has done enough share of research and diligence on the firm. Uh, and then, even before you apply, or at least at the time of the application itself, start preparing for your case interviews, because they hardly give you 1 week of time to interview after they notify you. So you would not be able to practice too much in a week. So try to be more proactive. Try to start your case interview prep even before the application windows open. At least try to get a basic touch. Uh, so to walk you through what I've had experience during my recruiting, I started applying for a lot of these prestigious consulting firms starting from the last week of June, and started interviewing with few consulting firms like that of LEK Consulting in the midweek of July. Uh, Even during August, September, I kept giving interviews to a lot of other consulting firms like Alvarez and Marcel, even interviewed with the corporate strategy team of Capital One. All of these essentially follow the same consulting case interview as far as their interview process is concerned. Maybe in few cases like that of Alvarez and Marcel, they might be using a group case interview for your final round as well, where 3 to 4 selected candidates would be placed in a group, and they would give you a very lengthy case study, which is quite intricate, which I still have some trouble understanding. And you're expected to decondense it, better formulate a set of strategies, and communicate that to the leadership team after you're done with the given time that has been given to you. So that's how it broadly functions. When it comes to Advancy, uh, I remember applying for the firm sometime in the first week of October, gave my first assessment round, which is some kind of a quantitative and aptitude test that you take in the first week of October itself. Then gave my first interview round in the last week of October, which was mostly behavioral. Gave my second round interview, which was primarily focused on a case interview in the first week of November. Gave my final round interview on November 17th, for which they flew me to New York City. That's a fancy aspect of consulting. They fly you to different cities when it comes to final rounds. And I got the offer on November 21st, which is my birthday. So so there were like 2 rounds of case interviews, and there was 1 round of behavioral interview. And even in case interviews, you can expect a set of behavioral questions. And I've not seen a lot of people recommending this, but the kind of questions you ask after an interview ends can leave a very strong impression on the interviewer. I'm not saying just because you're asking good quality questions, you're going to get the job, but when it comes to consulting, sometimes they might not have a fixed headcount in their mind. They might just have upper thresholds. Okay, let's not exceed 20 recruits or 30 recruits this year. And they can be quite flexible about potentially. So maybe if you're doing something that will help you stand out, if they're in a bit of a dilemma, they might give you an offer. So try to pay close attention, not just to the case component, but the behavioral component, which largely revolves around knowing about yourself and also knowing a lot about the firm, which can be understood only through a good number of networking calls. And I'm pretty sure a lot of consultants out there, they try their level best to be accessible to many people who try to reach out to them. And that's the best part of the industry, because that's potentially how it works. It's quite intense on the networking side.
Thank you so much, Roshan. And I think I'm sure it might be amazing to have an offer on your birthday. So that's really amazing. And I try to ask this one last question, which I'm really involved into. And that question this time would not be, how does it feel to like have an offer letter on your birthday? But you can talk about a minute on that. But my main question is that do you think that the so I think why am I asking is this question? Let me make it more clear. So why am I asking is this question is more because what I've heard from people is that they're like, you know, should we get into Duke, and would Duke matter? Would the name matter? So not just about Duke, be it any Ivy League. I know Duke is not an Ivy League university, but some prestigious universities that you know of. So I just want to hear your thoughts as well, just for the people's sake of it. And do you think the name matters? And if it does, I know you cannot count it in percentages, but how much do you feel, it really matters, and where and what point in time of your search or interview or these kind of journeys, where do you think it does matter?
Right. In my opinion, the institution that you have attended can be incredibly important for different jobs that you're applying for. And this might be even more important when you're applying for the consulting industry. Now, does that mean those who have gone to the so-called non-target schools, would they not be eligible, or would they not be able to get their foot in the door? Absolutely not. There have been many instances where students from even non-target schools or universities which do not have a strong brand recognition made into consulting and many other wonderful career paths. But getting into a university like that of Duke can give you a very strong edge over many other universities. Now, there are multiple reasons as to why this is the case. Number one, many prestigious consulting firms in the United States have a strong geographical footprint. They have offices in Atlanta, they have offices in Washington, D.C. PCG recently opened an office in Raleigh, Durham, which is probably the closest to Duke. These offices or the talent teams in these locations, they tend to invest a good amount of time, financial resources, and energy in terms of conducting recruiting events in a lot of these universities. So one, compared to folks in a lot of non-target schools, students going to these target schools have a much greater access for networking events, to even meet some of the senior leaders and more. The second thing is, obviously, you've gone to a prestigious university. That speaks volumes about your candidacy. Now, it's also important what you have accomplished after you've gone to the university, be it your grades, the internship experiences you have acquired, the leadership experiences you have acquired. These are all critical too. But going to a good university can in a way set you up for success. The third thing is alumni. I think you can make phenomenal connections at Duke, and for that matter, any other target school. Many people in your alumni network must have made it to firms that you're aspiring to get into. So it becomes one notch easier for you to connect and network with these individuals, just because they understand how hard it is to get into these universities, they would be willing to give you a referral or a piece of recommendation based on how good the conversation was. They might be a little bit easy on you. Again, depends on the individual. And most importantly, when you're going to a university like Duke, particularly the MEM program, we've had the opportunity to network with around 250 students. A lot of them are in phenomenal organizations, be it Apple, Microsoft, Walmart, and many more reputed institutions and organizations out there. Even if you were to switch jobs sometime in the future, you can always leverage the relationships or networks that you have built during your time at Duke, or for that matter, any prestigious school, to get your foot in one of these prestigious companies' doors. Again, these are not things that are exclusive to students who have gone to amazing schools, but there's some level of advantage that these people tend to enjoy because of maybe some piece of luck or maybe some piece of additional effort they've put when they were applying or when they were part of the admissions process.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Roshan. And I think we are on time, but as you know, I am very bad on keeping things on time. It's just that while we were having this conversation, so this is a new question that popped up in my mind. I know I should not extend it more than I mentioned, but you know how things are when we are talking, we always, kind of exceed the limit but of the conversation. So this question is very particular to what you mentioned about the location. So you mentioned that let's say BCG opened their offices in Raleigh, Durham. So I want to ask that, does the location, again, this is a most common question that I've heard from students. So do you think in consulting, the location of the university which you are studying, like doing your master's or an MBA, does the location matter? And when I say location, I mean, I'm sure you understand that, New York might be more of a financial district, and maybe Chicago as well. So people tend to go to NYU and Columbia and maybe Booth School of Business or something like that. So what are your thoughts on if somebody has to choose between, a location preference, or somebody has to choose between a university which they feel is better, where the learning curve is more? So is it just basically your thoughts on the location aspect of it?
I have a bit of a mixed answer for this. It matters in a couple of cases and it doesn't matter in a few cases. Especially if you're attending one of the so-called target schools, it might matter a little less because a lot of these firms have an eye on you, especially firms which have enough scale to absorb a huge capacity. Maybe if there's to give you a very strong example, there's a very prestigious European-based consulting firm known as Roland Berger. Now they're expanding very quickly in the United States. They have 3 offices in the US: Chicago, Detroit, and Boston. So none of these offices are close to where Duke is located, that is North Carolina. So unless and until you're putting tremendous amount of extra effort trying to get a piece of letter of recommendation from their senior partners or their senior leadership, students from Duke or maybe though students from universities which are not close to one of these 3 locations have a very hard time getting an interview call from these firms in spite of having a terrific profile. So it's just because Roland Berger's Chicago office is a bit focused on recruiting a good number of students from Northwestern University, which is close to Chicago, UIUC, maybe University of Chicago. They are still growing in the United States. They tend to recruit 20 or 30 junior consultants every year, and they can't diversify too much. It's strictly because of lack of capacity in terms of absorption. So yes, under certain circumstances, it matters. But when we are talking about very large organizations, particularly in the United States, they have their eyes on all the universities. And my understanding is if one is attending a non-target school, and particularly trying to get into an industry which employs a lot of people like tech industry, then location might matter even more. I can be partially wrong about this, but I heard very good things about San Jose State University, SJSU, and people attribute a lot of success to the career outcomes that students derive from this university because of its location. So again, I can be partly wrong about this, but I do believe for non-target schools, location might play a critical role. If you're trying to get into a very prestigious firm, which is still growing in the United States, location might matter. Even if you look at Capital One, they pay a slightly more attention to Duke University because we're just 4 hours away from Washington, D.C. So it's not a deal breaker. It's just one of the factors, maybe the smaller factors. which might determine your job prospects.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Roshan, for explaining that really nicely. And as we are already over time, so first of all, I really appreciate you being on the call and helping me explain all those details and the most commonly asked questions. So I hope people look at this video and learn more and understand more. Yeah, I think thank you so much again for being on the call and sharing all your insights and thoughts. So I really appreciate that.
No, absolutely. I love doing these things, and it's perhaps because of videos of these kinds or podcasts of these kinds that I had good amount of confidence when I came back to the United States in 2022. So hopefully this can provide the much required insights for some candidate or individual out there who is willing to do something big in his or her life.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Roshan. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.